Hello everyone and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 221. My name is NBZ and I've just been talking to Bally about how my pop filter on my microphone is just a mess. It's just disgusting. I've had it for probably 8 years now and you know I don't realize this, but I think I spit a lot when I talk and I'm not sure why that is. Maybe I just need better mouth posture or whatever. I need to go to some kind of I don't know what you'd call it, but yeah, it needs replacing and it's dirty and it's terrible. But it's one of those things that you never get around to it. There are always those tasks in life where you look at something, you're like, I should do something about that, and then you don't, and then it just kind of sits there for ages, and eventually you're forced into it.
I do think that's one thing about doing a podcast is I think it's a lot easier to put out episodes of a podcast than it is to, do a lot of the admin around a podcast. So I'm talking like get new microphones, get new equipment, change something up. It's harder to do the change than it is to put out the show.
Yeah, people don't like change, it's difficult and it's often weird and it's hard to do, and that's why I think it takes a while for people to do it. But anyway, there's not much changing around here at the moment. We're just here to talk about video games, so that's what we're here to do. Bally, how you been doing? How things holding up? How you been feeling? Still exhausted, or are you doing all right?
Yeah, Bally Jr. had some jabs very recently, and that was he's just about as sorts from his jabs, and it's a lot to deal with. He does not like sleeping because he's feeling a bit under the weather from his jabs, which is a bit annoying. But
now, I was reminded recently that in Scotland they call them jags with a G instead of jabs with a B, which is usually in England is what they call them. And I was like, oh yeah, they were called jags, weren't they, in Scotland? I don't know what the etymology is behind that, or why. I'm not sure if you have any insight on that, but that's weird to me.
I'm really not sure. I go with jabs. I'm just not a good enough Scot, I guess. But yeah. But otherwise, Bally Jr. has been very well behaved and sleeping pretty well. And I'm getting in some good game sessions, which has been great.
Of course, yeah, sitting there as you swing your arms about and hopefully don't throw a Joy-Con at him.
Gotta get that strap on.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, we have a show for you today in which we're going to talk about video games that may involve throwing Joy-Cons at televisions if you're not wearing your strap, which I haven't been. But yeah, Bally, do you want to tell the fine folks what the show is going to involve today?
We've got a 2-segment show this time. First segment, we're going to talk about the games that we have been playing. And the second segment, we've got a few of your emails.
Absolutely. Before we get into that, I just want to shout out, we would love some more emails from people. Our inbox is dangerously low. So either if you hop in the Discord, which is linked in the description, or if you email our email address, which Bally will tell you now, then you can fill up our inbox, which would be very nice. And if you've never written in before, if you want to write in and have a curious question you want to pose to us, then send it to
ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That's ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com.
Fantastic, and we'll remind you again at the end of the show. That would be very nice of you to do, so that we can get some more questions in, which is always a great way to interact with people and get some interesting topics going. The other thing I want to shout out is thanks to everyone who has gone and reviewed us on Spotify. We jumped up a significant amount thanks to folks going on there and hitting the review on the mobile app. As I mentioned, that's kind of the only place you can review at the moment. Spotify's got a weird system, and hopefully they'll bring it to desktop and make it easier for folks at some point in the future. But very much appreciate everyone who has gone and done that. We're almost at 50, so if we can get over 50, that would be fantastic. Really appreciate that. Only a few away, so head over to Spotify and rate and review us. Although you can't actually write a review on there, you can just click the 5-star button.
You've just got to listen to a little bit of any random episode for like literally a few seconds, and then you're able to do a rating out of 5 stars.
Exactly. So even if you listen to this on YouTube, for example, if you're on YouTube watching the YouTube video version, or if you're just on a podcasting app that isn't Spotify, you can just head on over there and quickly give it a listen and rate it, and that would be really appreciated. Even if you don't use the platform, just helps us get out to more folks. But Bally, let's talk about Joy-Cons, throwing them places, moving them about. Nintendo Switch Sports is the big release of the last couple of weeks for us here, and we've been playing a good amount of it. It's obviously got a lot of issues in terms of what people were talking about before launch of reviewers weren't able to play it online and they didn't know what the progression was going to be like and that sort of stuff. But yeah, I guess I'm just interested in your top level thoughts. What did you think coming into Switch Sports? How are you feeling about it?
It's about what I would have expected, but at the same time, it's reminding me, wow, Wii Sports was really great. And I think what's so great about this is I've got a great sparring partner. Like you are a great sparring partner with this game, and I think that sure, it's got some middling reviews out there, but I think you can easily whap on an extra 10-15% in terms of, you know, Metacritic reviews and all that if you've got a good sparring partner to play these games online
or just
with.
like a group of people generally,
or a group of people either online or locally, because I think the games in and of themselves are a lot of fun. I think they're really well designed. I think the old games, bowling is not improved. It's the one that's gone backwards. We can get into that, but top level, I think the sports generally are really great. I love the new sports. There's a lot of hit the thing over the net sports. I'm happy with that. I'm a big hit the thing over the net fan.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely a fan of those ones. I think football is a real highlight that just looked silly and simple on the face of it, but it's great fun to play. And I think that, yeah, playing all of these online with you has just been a real blast. And for, what was it, £30 in the UK, I think it's a really good deal. And it's just a very solid package. It's nothing special. I really hope they have more sports down the line other than golf. I want more than golf, as much as I'm really excited for golf, because that was one of my favorites on Wii. But for me, this thing really has legs if they have a few more sports. As it stands, I still think it's a really great package, and for the price, considering I've got a sparring partner, it's a really fun experience.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people coming into this, maybe it speaks to how expectations have changed, right, over the years, that Wii Sports wasn't like that rounded out of a package. I think it did have, like, obviously the 5 different sports, and you had like little elements to it, but I think a lot more people are coming into this and being like, well, this is a bit thin, isn't it? Like, there's not much here, where in reality, like, there's one more sport than the original Wii Sports had, and it's got online functionality, which gives it a bit of a longer lifespan in some senses. But I will say that maybe my biggest disappointment with it is it doesn't have some of those kind of mini game things that the original game had. I'm thinking of stuff like in tennis, where you rebounded off the wall, where you were doing rallies over the net with an AI opponent who you just tried to get the longest rally with, trying to hit the backboard that kept moving behind. Some of my favorite memories of Wii Sports is just doing high score stuff with that single player kind of content, and this game doesn't really have that. The differences that I've noticed are there's one additional mode you can do with football offline, where you strap the leg strap to your thing and you kick balls into a goal. There's also a special version of bowling, where the bowling lane has like obstacles in the way and other stuff to kind of sauce it up a bit, make it a bit more interesting. I think there might be one other thing, but like I think most of these sports are either like just play tennis and that's it, and there's no other kind of additional way to engage with it offline, which I think is why when a lot of people were playing this, like, well, there's not much going on here. And it really comes down to, I think, going online, playing against other real opponents, which at the start, I'm pretty sure they just pair you with bots. I might be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that like the first game of bowling that I played online, I destroyed and beat everybody, and I was like, that's weird. Like, I was never close to winning at all.
I thought you just played harder and harder people the more you won.
So there is that factor as well. We can get into that. That's kind of the ranked thing going on. But initially, I think so what I did when I first started the game was, instead of going to the single player stuff, I just went straight online. And if you have not played a sport before, it basically gives you a tutorial before you go online. But I think what it actually does is it gives you the tutorial, then it throws you into a quote-unquote online match.
Right, yeah, I was thinking that, because they can't just be waiting around while you do the tutorial.
Yeah, that first online match is actually a fake bot match, I think is what it is. So they teach you stuff, like you'll play volleyball, and then they'll be like, okay, we're going to put you in an online match now, and that online match is actually against bots, just to kind of give you a flavor to start off and to learn the ropes and that type of thing. But then after that point, I'm pretty sure it just puts you into like the pool of players playing and all that sort of thing. So yeah, maybe let's go sport by sport and kind of break them down. Let's start with tennis. Tennis, I think, is probably the one that has changed the least from original Wii Sports to now.
It looks very pretty.
Yeah, feels quite similar. Has there's a good variety of different like looking courses that you go between. I'm not sure how many there are, but it always kind of loads in a different one.
Tennis courts.
Courts, yes. Courts. Sorry. Courts that you can go between.
I don't think there's much difference between the way the I'm going to say courts feel.
There's no like ball bounce stuff going on with clay and stuff. Was there that in Wii Sports? I don't think there was really.
No, you always played on the grass court in Wii Sports. There was no other court unless you went to a training court, and then you played on like the blue hard court.
Exactly.
I think tennis, you're right, has changed the least. It does still feel pretty damn good, in my opinion. I think that I find it hard. I've really been trying to angle the Joy-Con and hit like slice shots on like backhand, which I felt like I was more able to do with the Wiimote.
I agree.
I'm pretty sure the functionality is still there. I just can't do it very consistently. But like you said before, there's no single player just rally with a person mode, which is kind of where I learned a lot of those shots from, like experimentation offline, just single player, learning all these things. So without a mode to just... I guess you can always play single player offline, but it's not the same in match play. You just want to rally with someone and really experiment with what the shots feel like. And you can't really do that in this game, which is a bit annoying. I think the window on getting like a fast serve is a lot tighter.
It's really hard.
But also I think the serve might even be even faster, which also makes it a bit unplayable. But it's a fun thing to try and get good at, and we've managed to do it a little bit, but not consistently.
Like when you get it, it feels like, oh shit, I'm probably going to ace this person for the most part, which is good and that's nice. But because it's so hard to do, you get it far less frequently. So it doesn't feel like, I'm sure when you get into the pro leagues, there's going to be people who are acing you or doing the fast shot every single time because they just have the timing down. But I think like the tightness of the window is such that it's a lot harder to pull off. And so it just balances out, I think. They've made it faster, but also it's harder to pull off. So it feels a bit more rewarding and special when you do get it, which is cool.
I like the addition of, and they've got this within badminton as well, where if you sort of mistime a shot or hit a weak shot, you'll almost just flub it up in the air and have like a purple tail, and that basically means that ball or shuttlecock is smashable, and your opponent, if they time it a decent time, will do a big smash shot, and they do an overarm smash, which feels really good, which just wasn't in the first game. Like if someone hit a high ball in tennis in the first game in Wii Sports, you would just have to like volley the ball back or like wait for it to bounce and then hit a regular shot, whereas being able to actually smash the ball to finish the point feels a lot more realistic, like doubles tennis, and just a lot more satisfying.
It really allows you to... It just feels like the skill ceiling is a little higher, right? Like there's these ways in which it is the same, but like there are these little tweaks they've done to make it a bit more competitive, and I think that makes sense given that they have the ranking mode in there now, right, where you have to differentiate yourself from the competition, and being able to do so is predicated on things like fluffing up shots by mistiming them and therefore giving your opponent an opening in which they can kind of come through and do that. But
it kind of forces you to go for the safer shot as well. Like often with Wii Sports, you could just swing, and if your front player missed, you'd know your back player would get it, and I feel more reticent to do that because I'm worried I'm going to do a flub shot and they smash me. So you want to be assertive in the shots that you're picking and choosing to play, rather than just kind of waving your Wiimote about like you used to with like Wii Sports a bit more.
It is that interesting thing actually with tennis where if you swing with your back player, your front player doesn't swing, but every time you swing with your front player, your back player also swings. It's like the back player is the default, and then your front player is kind of an option basically. And the way that I think most people play tennis is that they rely on the back player the most, and they'll just pepper in the front player for like bits and pieces here and there. But it's all about switching things up. And I would say badminton, maybe moving on from tennis, is tennis with a bit more complexity to it. So you have, personally, I'm a huge fan of badminton. It's probably my favorite like individual sport. If I'm actually playing a sport, I really enjoy it, and I played it a lot growing up. And I think that it has an interesting kind of variant because you have high shots that kind of float through the air, and then you have like smash shots that you can kind of angle and direct downwards and are harder to hit back. And you can kind of get into this rhythm, I think, with badminton, where if someone keeps smashing your shots, you need to kind of switch it up because you're not going to get them back by like just putting like the blue high shots, the ones that float in the air. if you're hitting a smash shot against someone, they usually will respond by doing a blue one back, because there's no other way to get it back, unless you want to do a drop shot. And that's where the complexity comes in with badminton, is you have this option to hold down the trigger, and then you just pop the shuttlecock over the net with this kind of very wobbly little shot that isn't actually out of control one, but it basically just has that little kind of trail behind it. Yeah, it's that trail behind it to show that it's a drop shot, basically. So they have nice indicators, I think, for all of these different shots as you go through. And yeah, that complexity for badminton has really made it one of the most enjoyable for me. Just having that kind of tactics of, okay, we're going back and forth here, I'm smashing, and then you just want to switch it up with a drop shot in there, and then just making sure that you have an opportunity to make your opponent mistime something. Because if they mistime it, then it sets you up for a really slow floaty one that you can do a purple smash on. And that's where you get the big points, because those are really hard to return, and are pretty tricky to get your head around.
It's nice because it's a lot more about the mind games than it is perhaps with tennis, where it's more about execution. And what's cool about badminton is, you're right. So I worked this out last night, but if you're the player that's just constantly smashing, there's two advantages you have. One is that by playing smash shots, you can't actually flub your shot if you do a smash shot. You can obviously miss the shot and it'll hit the floor and you lose. But you can't do like a flub shot that will be smashed extra hard back at you. Secondly, when you're smashing, you can hit the shuttlecock earlier or later, depending on the speed at which you do your smash, and it can completely alter the timing of when your opponent returns the shuttlecock, and as a result, they can hit a flub shot. So, like, it's just clever that if you're the one always smashing, you've got a real advantage of manipulating the opponent around the court.
You're like in control of the board.
You're in control of the
like,
point, and then you're right. It's on them to drop shot you, to force you to underarm your next shot, and then they become the smashing player. And it's just really good mind games. And yeah, you definitely just had the upper hand on me for a lot of those rallies where I was just constantly hitting flub shots and you were smashing them, and it was just because I think you were just manipulating me around the court a lot better. Yeah. And I saw so there's little tips that appear on loading screens in this game, and one tip I noticed for badminton was, they want you to get your Joy-Con in a position to hit a shot earlier, and that speeds up your player getting to the shuttlecock. So if you already know you're going to play an underarm shot because they've drop shotted you, the quicker you angle your Joy-Con to make it look like you're going to play an underarm shot, the faster your player will move to the shuttlecock.
Oh,
and likewise,
interesting.
if you're going to play a smash shot, get into that smash position, and it knows whether you've got the Joy-Con high or low ready to play one of those shots, and your character will speed up getting to the shuttlecock as a result. So, like, it is actually quite technically, probably the most technical out of all the games, to be honest.
That makes sense, right? Because there was certainly times where I would drop shot someone who was far away and they were expecting a smash to come, and so they were probably like in a certain position to counter it, and therefore their character wasn't fast enough to get to the net to hit that back.
Yeah, I mean, if they got there early or late, they'd hit a flub shot and then you smashed them, and like that's what you constantly did to me. I was trying to judge whether you're going to go deep or shallow, and as a result, I was late or early to the shuttlecock and hit a flub, and then you smash me and win the points. Like, there's a real mind game to it, and it's executed really well. Like, it feels really good with the Joy-Con. And generally, it's nice just having sensor bar free like gameplay with this. Like, it feels good.
I think that we'll probably bring this up again with stuff like Chambara, but like the Joy-Con, and I had this with Skyward Sword, we had it with Mario Galaxy, because you don't have the sensor bar, you don't have the infrared constantly arranging, readjusting the position. It does force you to constantly press the X button to like recalibrate your base position, basically, which is annoying and can like sometimes get out of control. Where this has happened to me as well. Like when we first started playing Switch and Joy-Cons had issues with connectivity, I think my new Joy-Cons still have that issue because sometimes it will just like feel like it's not getting good response from the Switch itself.
The conductor goes or something, like you have it around the back. Remember.
It was a nightmare, but it hasn't happened too badly for me, thankfully, which is good. The interesting thing for me about badminton is like how easily it maps to the actual sport. Like, I think part of me like moving around the court and stuff like that is me having a lot of experience with the actual sport and knowing the ways in which badminton.
Crush you at tennis.
Yeah, exactly. No, I do think there is a factor there. Honestly,
no, I agree,
at least from the beginning of it, because I've played a lot of badminton, so I know the way that you usually like move people around a court and like manipulate things and when to play a drop shot and when to do do smash shots and things like that. So I think it's something that obviously you can pick up very quickly, and I'm sure in due time, Bally, you'll get good enough to where you can thrash me, and that generally happens with Wii Sports. Generally, you're much better than me at these games. But yeah, I did take a thrill in being able to beat you at badminton. That was good. And yeah, I think it is probably one of the most complex ones, and has a lot of satisfaction to it. You get into really long rallies, especially when you're in ranked mode against other good players. I've had rallies that just go on forever and ever and ever, and it really is like that. Who's going to make the first mistake? Because as soon as that happens, the person is in there and they get the purple smash shot in, and you're done. There's a nice tension to it. You
can return those purple smashes. You just have to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. So it's a really good one. It's probably one of my favorites of the new ones, probably my favorite of the new sports overall. And yeah, looking forward to playing a lot more of it and going through that. Maybe let's finish out the trio of the hitting things over net with volleyball, which is a really interesting one. Obviously, it's 2 players, 2 versus 2. So when you're playing online, you'll be matched with someone else. Interesting with tennis. Like tennis, you get control over both characters, whereas in volleyball, you only get control over one. And I understand why, because there is actually quite a lot to think about of like the different states of being in volleyball. What I mean by that is you'll constantly go between the person who is either receiving a shot to pop it up in the air, the person who then pops it back for a spike shot, and then the person who is doing the spike shot, and inversely the person who is jumping to block at the net and the person who is at the back trying to receive the ball. So there are like 5 different states of being you can be in volleyball, and I think for the purpose of simplicity, having it split between 2 players allows you to rotate between those duties, but in a way that is always manageable and doesn't kind of like make you panic all the time, right? I think it's a lot to get around your head at first, but once you get your head around it, it's like, okay, I just need to remember like where I'm at and be really kind of cognizant of what's going on, because sometimes when if you pop the ball up and your friend is jumping to spike it, if the opponent blocks, then the ball could very quickly come back to you, and you're the one who has to react to pop that back up again on your side. And I often find myself basically paying attention to the person spiking, thinking, oh, they're going to get it and get us a point, and then being not fast enough to respond when your opponent blocks it and you have to be the one to pick up the pieces, which is tricky to get your head around. But I think I just need to play a bit more of volleyball to understand it. But yeah, how do you feel about this one?
I think it's fantastic, actually. It's easy to pick up, hard to master, and I think there's a few of these games that are like that, and this is definitely one where it's predominantly timing based, but there's still some positioning to do when you're doing a certain role, like you said. And there's a real skill in, first of all, nailing the timing, because it's almost like Mario Strikers, where you're essentially like charging the ball for more power, but rather than charging the ball by holding like a button, you're charging the ball by timing it well.
Yes. So if you mess up the timing, it basically has different like all of these do. I think it's a really nice
colored
line.
Tails, yes.
Yeah, all the different tails. Like usually orange is a powerful shot, but purple is a super powerful shot, right? And then
and it's consistent across sports. So like it's this language they build up, which is really nice.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, so there's timing in the power of the shots, but then as you said, like you can be the blocker near the net replying to their smash. Equally, you can be the person at the back. And there's a real skill, say you're the blocker, there's real skill in the positioning of your block. So say you want to, because you're essentially wanting to block half the court. Because if you're blocking your half of the court and you're responsible, and your partner is covering the other half of the court that you're not covering, no matter how hard they smash the ball, you can essentially like guarantee you will be able to like either block the ball if they come to you, or your partner will get the ball. And what can be tempting is if you want to go closer across the net, and then you can leave a gap behind you, and then they smash it into that corner of the court. So like there's a real strategy in that sense, on top of the fact that there's a real strategy in the timing of blocking, where it really feels like genuine. Not that I've played volleyball, but you kind of get the feel from watching it, where there's a real timing in you see this watching it like at the Olympics. But sometimes the spikers will do like they'll have like dummy jumpers, where they have a person dummying a spike in order for the next person to do a proper spike, and you realize that as you're jumping to spike the ball, you can kind of do an early spike or a late spike to put off the blocker in front of you. And there's a real timing, like cat and mouse kind of chicken egg scenario going on where you're trying to outwit the person blocking you, and it's just that kind of aspect that is nails volleyball to a T, where I think they've just really created a system that's, you know, really good fun. And like, I've played quite a few people online with volleyball and had some really good partners actually who have really been able to spike and block effectively, and it's really satisfying to watch them kind of do it. I think it's a really well designed game. I think it's one, like I said, I think the 3 net sports are generally my favorite, but this one, like, it's the one that kind of has surprised me the most, I think.
Yeah, it's also nice with this one having a direct partner using the little emojis to like say good job, like that
exactly,
person, because usually the emojis are like you're just one-on-one in Chumbara or in tennis or whatever, and it's usually like, oh, one of them is sad when you lose a point and the other person is happy, but you can like use your different emotions and stuff that you unlock from the cosmetic stuff to kind of like communicate a little bit.
You know how there are unlockable like emojis as part of like the clothes kits that you unlock? We can talk about it later, but I wonder if they will eventually do a Triforce Heroes pack, and you can unlock the Triforce Heroes emojis within Switch Sports. That'd be great.
I'm honestly, I am pretty sure that they'll put themed stuff in, like Mario and Zelda and all that sort of stuff. They got to do that. That would bring me back to the game, I think, for a lot of like just unlocking those things. I think that's a good, fun way to do it. But yes, I think the other thing I was going to say about volleyball is there is this almost unreality to the way in which the spiker jumps and almost hovers for a second in the air before like deciding the timing at which you're going to hit the ball.
It's that hang time,
It's that hang time which allows that kind of that, again, mind games. I think mind games are a really good kind of like core idea for a lot of these sports of just who's going to crack first. Is it going to be me who's going to delay my spike so that I preempt the jump, and then by the time that you're falling I get the spike in, or am I going to go early with it so I catch you before you jump for the block?
It makes the skill ceiling so much higher, because say you have the same skill as the person you're playing, then it is all about the mind games and the execution. It's less so just I'm more skillful than you, therefore I will win, which is kind of how most of the sports traditionally went in Wii Sports. And I feel like badminton and volleyball to a degree, because of these mind games, it's a lot more tactical, which is quite nice and reflects those sports well.
Yeah, totally. Speaking of mind games, I think we got to talk about Mind Games the game, which is Chumbara. Chumbara is, I think, like one of the most tense games, probably the most tense game in this entire package.
This is another sport that you really have me served at. Like, you are really dominating.
I mean, it's hard. It is really difficult. And I think the thing about it, right, because I didn't play too much Wii Sports Resort. I think we both owned that game.
I'd never owned Wii Sports Resort.
Did you not?
T owned it, and you did later, I believe.
Yeah. Okay. Did you like borrow it from him at any point in time, or
maybe? But I only own one. What do you call it? Wii Motion Plus, and that was my Zelda Skyward Sword Golden.
Yeah. So yeah, I bought it super cheap years later, but like by that point, we weren't in person a lot, like playing local multiplayer stuff like we did back when Wii Sports first came out. And so
before Nintendo knew what online was.
Exactly, like there was no online for Resort either, so it was a lot of me just being like, okay, I guess I'll throw this frisbee for a dog for a while and then like do some playing thing. And table tennis was cool. I think table tennis is one of the coolest ones.
I remember playing the Alley T says, as much as we already have a lot of net hit the thing over the net sports, I really want table tennis.
Yeah, it's slightly different, isn't it? And it's a lot more about the kind of angling, spinning, cutting, that type of stuff.
Yeah, love it.
Which, I don't know, given the way that the kind of angling stuff works in tennis in the Switch version, I'm not sure if it will be as good as the Wii Motion Plus version.
Oh, it will be. It will be.
All right. Okay.
I have faith.
All right. I just find it when playing tennis like very hard to get those kind of curved shots or like angled shots, shots, top spin, stuff like that. It just seems a little bit trickier than it was on Wii, but I don't know, it's just weirdness with the Joy-Cons and the as we were saying, just not kind of readjusting itself, recalibrating as easily. But anyway, Chumbara, which is the spiritual successor to the sword fighting game in Wii Sports. I don't know where the name Chumbara comes from, if it's a Japanese thing or if it's from somewhere else in the world, what its origins are. But it's basically one-on-one sword fighting where you have these wooden sticks that are swords. There are 3 options actually, which I think this has even more depth on top of the mind games because of the different types of sword that you can use. There's a regular sword, there's a charge sword, which basically as you block opponents, you you fill up this kind of purple glowing meter, and then you can hold down one of the shoulder buttons to execute a much more powerful shove, but it just means your regular hits are less powerful. So base hits on the charge sword are not as strong as the regular sword, but you have the option to charge them. And then you have the double swords, which have like a spin attack and a bunch of other stuff, but it means
tried
that...
them yet. I'm too scared.
Well, the thing with the double sword, I fought someone with it yesterday night, and when you hit them, they get knocked back a lot further, but they also knock you back further. So they're like kind of glass cannon almost.
Okay, right.
And they can obviously they can block with one and hit with the other, and it's really hard and complicated. And I lost to that dude because I just wasn't really sure what the hell was going on. He was doing fucking spin attacks and all this nonsense. But I think at a base level, I really like just regular sword versus regular sword, because it is very much this kind of it is all purely about where are you blocking, where is your opponent going to hit, who is going to break first, who is going to go for the shot and then get blocked and then open themselves up to attack. And it is this cat and mouse game of, okay, I'm just slowly blocking left, right, moving my Joy-Con, just hoping to not be too obvious and not give you an opening. Because the way that you attack someone is if you're hitting in the same direction that they're holding. So say they're holding the stick or the sword, I guess, vertically. If you slice downwards, you will hit them because they're blocking stuff that was going to come from the left and right. Likewise, if they're holding it horizontally, if you slice them horizontally, you'll cut through that and be able to hit them. So it is this weird thing where you're kind of your brain, I think, almost wants to hit it in the opposite direction so that you clash swords, but that's bad because that's going to kind of put you off balance and then allow your opponent an entryway to come in and attack you. There's also a thrust move that I haven't used that much, and I'm not actually sure what blocks the thrust move, but yeah, that's kind of like a jab that you can throw in there as well. And I find every time I start a match in Chambara, I'm sweating. I'm just oh god. It's just, the tension is palpable because you're there's this real slow, almost Jedi thing where you're just pacing around each other and just waiting for someone to make an opening, and then someone does, and then it's there's a panic almost of if someone gets an opening and you're off balance and they just hit you again and again, you can really fall apart quite quickly in this game.
Yeah, it's very satisfying. Yeah, we had so many games, and yes, you won most of them, but most of the games still felt quite tight and in the balance, and there were times where I'd get you near to the edge and then you just fight back and vice versa, and it does to a degree. It did feel like rock paper scissors sped up massively, but in a very fun tactical kind of way. And you're right, it's about once you're on top, how does that person recover, and likewise, how do you make the most of being on top and getting them off the stage? Because it's I think it's really well done, and it's done well in terms of its tension, but it doesn't just feel like plain old sword swiping, because as you said initially, it's the person who defends first often had the advantage with us, where they'd often get the first block in, and then it was uphill for the defender from there. So it was almost like the person who was offending first, attacking first, was struggling to get that first hit in and make contact to get the stream of attacks going. So it's really, I like the cat and mouse nature of it. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, and I do think there is added depth, as I mentioned there, having the different types of swords, and it's definitely, I actually initially thought that they would only pair you with someone who's using the same weapon as you, but it's not the case. You do face off against people who are using other weapons. I mainly have stuck to the basic one, but I've tried out the charge one, and I think I tried the double sword in the test that they did, the test that no one played because Nintendo wouldn't allow you to talk about it on social media. There were twin swords in that as well, and that's some real Jedi shit when you have the twin swords. I wonder if they added a fucking dual-bladed sword at some point, and you're no, we're really leading it at this point. But the other nice thing is if you have a draw, if it comes down to you've drawn one game and one person's won one and one person's won the other, then it goes to a sudden death mode where they basically shrink the stage to this tiny little circle, and so it's basically who can crack first, because if you get one hit in, you're off the side, which is a nice way to handle that. And it definitely has happened multiple times where I've just drawn with people and neither of us are able to get each other off the side, and you just keep going back and forth, and the time runs out essentially, and it's well, it's a draw, and that is, that ramps up the tension even more so. So really, really like Chambara. The last new game that was added was football, which is an interesting one. And I think this is the one I've heard people talk the most shit about. And it's the one where I think our opinion differs the most from what I've heard from listening to other people talk about this game. Because I think football is so much fun and such a weird but like almost strange. It's this weird thing of like, okay, Rocket League was football with cars, and then like after that it's like Nintendo looked at Rocket League and they're like, but what if football with cars but with people? And it's like, okay, that's it's like this whole
What was Rocket League? You mean what was the thing in Federation Force?
Blast Ball.
Blast Ball but with people.
Right, it's like the snake eating its own tail type of thing of like you have Indiana Jones to Uncharted, then Uncharted is like the Uncharted movie, and it's like I don't like these things don't make sense. But in a weird way, football does make. I think football actually clicked for me a lot more when it was me versus you 1v1, honestly. And I think that's actually my preferred way of playing football, because personally I think the field for the 4-player version is a little too big. Like it's a lot of space, and your character moves relatively slowly, and you have a stamina bar that depletes quite fast as well, so you run out of stamina very easily while playing this game. And so in the main game it does lead to situations where like it's just big field, everyone's like running across, and it takes a while maybe for people to get to the ball, and so it leads to quite low scoring games, which I guess is actually kind of emblematic of football itself. But still it feels like there's a little less action going on. However, it does have so you can hold down a shoulder button to pass the ball, so when you do use your Joy-Con to kind of flick it, you can like use that passing option. And I think the more I've played football with people online, people are doing that a bit more, getting into like more traditional positionings. Not everyone is just chasing after the ball, like having more like roles that you should do, because that's the thing with playground football, right, is everyone just chases after the ball, and actual football requires...
Yeah, but when you reach that age where you realize, actually, if I stand in space and then someone passes me the ball because I'm in space, like it's a very satisfying feeling.
Exactly, and it feels like the whole community of Switch Sports is like starting to figure that out now, because it always starts like this, isn't it? The first thing with a game like this is everyone just chases the ball, and then eventually everyone figures out, no, that's not the best approach here. But yeah, I do think the one-on-one stuff is really fun, because it's a much smaller field, and so you really have that kind of back and forth tension of like, oh, am I gonna knock it over your head? Like I kept volleying you constantly, and so it'd go over your head and you wouldn't be able to jump in time and catch it, and that was fun. And they also have a mercy mechanic, which is if someone scores 2 goals, they'll put a golden ball in play, and the golden ball will be worth 2 points. So either the person who's ahead will score and it will end the match prematurely, because they know that it's going to take too much for the other person to retaliate, or if the person who's behind scores, then it puts you level again. So it's almost a Mario Kart blue shell mechanic with a bit more risk to it, which I like, and I think is a fun way to do it. And this is also the only game that requires 2 Joy-Con to use, because you use the left one as analog stick to run your character around, and then you can use either one actually to swing and do your football kicks, and all the kicks are angled. You can do bicycle kicks, you can jump in the air and kick as well, and obviously you can run and use your stamina up, but yeah,
and you can do a diving header, which feels fantastic.
If you basically put both Joy-Cons, swing them both down at the same time, you do a big diving header, which takes up a lot of stamina, but also like can get you out of sticky situations by giving you a bit more momentum. Bally, seems like you took to football quite immediately.
I really, really like football, and it's interesting what you say about the sort of 4v4 versus the 1v1, and I would honestly just class them as 2 different sports, because and I actually enjoy them roughly equally. Playing you 1-on-1 was a blast, and just dribbling around the other player or lobbing you and those mind games and things and rebounding off the ball.
I should say that I think part of the reason we like this so much is because it's so reminiscent of this dumb 1 versus 1 football thing that we used to do when we were younger.
It was a very good game,
where it was basically just like a small little patch of grass, like in someone's garden or in the park that we went to. It was me, you, and Ali T, and we would round robin 1 versus 1 football, where we'd have these small goals, and we'd basically 1 versus 1 each other to try and see who could score, and the person who scored stayed on, and the other person rotated off.
It's a solid game.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just a basic version of football, and this is basically exactly that, which I think is why we like it so much.
It's very funny.
Yeah.
But but equally as fun as it is to play you 1-on-1, I had a blast just playing the 4v4, and my team was already acting quite tactically, where we were standing in space, we were covering each other, we were passing the ball and, you know, going for the diving headers at the right time and really saving your stamina meter, because they clearly want you to save it and build it up. And then the players who are the more tactically astute you can be, and essentially like a defensive midfielder, the getting in the right positions at the right time using little effort allows you to then have more energy to sprint when it's most important. And it's kind of like training you into that, which I really appreciate, and is a bit like Rocket League, where you are saving your boost for the right moment, although Rocket League is 10 times faster.
Yeah,
it is still the same logic. And I as a big Rocket League fan, I really appreciate like that tactical aspect of the 4v4, and for me it really works. And sure, I've had a couple of duff teams, but when they've got a team that kind of works together a bit better, it's a really, really impressive game. Like I think as a package, I really like all these sports apart from the one we're about to talk about.
Sorry, I thought there was only 5 sports in Switch Sports.
It might as well be. Judging by the internet, there's only one sport in this game, and that's bowling. So
yeah,
apparently we're wrong.
We are, that's the thing, like, we love football and we think bowling is bad, and I think that's the opposite opinion of literally everyone I've heard talk about this game, which is interesting. Like, I think so many people love bowling. Part of it is it's the lowest barrier to entry, right? When Wii Sports came out, my mum played some Wii Sports, and the thing that she was the best at, the thing that she enjoyed the most, was bowling, and it's because it's so simple, it maps directly to the actual game. Bowling as a quote-unquote sport is the easiest thing, like, for regular people.
But they've made the barrier even lower this time. That's the annoying thing, to its detriment.
Yeah, so I think one of the key strengths of bowling back then was that you would hold down the B button on your Wii remote, and then as you swung your controller, you would let go of B in order to map like when you would throw the ball, how much kind of lift you would get, like how much speed you would get off of it. Same with like tilting it to get a bit of spin on it. They've changed that now so that you just keep holding down the shoulder button. And this was really baffling when I first played the kind of demo and realized I kept fucking up. I was like, what the hell is going on? The problem was I was letting go of the shoulder button when I should have been just holding it the whole way through. And it honestly, like, where every other game feels like it's increased in complexity, bowling feels like it's decreased in complexity to its detriment, to where now it doesn't feel like you have good control over like the speed or like when the ball is thrown or any of that stuff, because you're just holding it the whole way through. So it almost removes some of that tangibility that made bowling so good in the first place. So yeah, it's rough.
It's mad. It's mad because the first game taught you, from its single player modes, they taught you if you want to throw a ball with no spin, the actual tactic is to release the ball late. So by releasing the ball late, you're dropping the ball from a height, and by dropping it from a height, the ball will travel down the
Center,
aisle,
yeah.
whatever you call it, with
the lane, yeah.
The lane with no spin. That's actually a tactic. And the reverse of that is if you release the ball at just the moment your hand is near the lane, then you can put more spin on the ball. That's like the whole point. That's like a smooth transition to transfer all the spin from your hand into the ball. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have that ability to release at the moment your hand's near the lane, you're not able to finesse the ball with the spin that you want. So as a result, for someone like me who loves putting a big ton of spin on, I can't consistently put my spin on because I can't consistently release the ball at the moment my hand's near the lane because I'm releasing it too late. Yeah. So I lose all the spin. And as a result, the process is a lot less enjoyable. Now, someone will probably argue, Bally, you just need to practice this new mode, and eventually you'll learn that there's like more technique in like getting your arm lower or some rubbish like that. But ultimately, that was what was so great about the Wii Sports version is, you know, spin or no spin, people would know to release the button and they could have a good time. Whereas now, it's just the pros who can spin, whereas I think people with less skill before were able to spin because they were able to release the ball at the right time. I think now it's just a complicated mess that Nintendo have just done to stop people throwing Joy-Cons at the screens, which apparently isn't working because people are still doing it.
Yeah.
So bring the button back into release. That's why I say do it through an update.
Yeah. I do like their kind of switch up to bowling in the sense that they've gone battle royale with it.
That's
like
fun. I like that.
It's a neat twist,
Yeah.
and I think it's a cool way to approach that idea of like beating other people, but also like having everyone go at the same time means that you're not waiting for the other person.
Yeah.
Although that said, bowling still includes the most waiting time because if you score a strike, then you're just kind of sitting there for 10 seconds while everyone else finishes their second bowl, and so it still has a bit more downtime than the rest of the sports, which we can maybe talk about, like that idea of. So the progression in this game is they have these cards, and these cards have a bunch of cosmetic things attached to them. Either it is a title card, which gives you a bunch of words that you can use to label your character, like give them a little weird title, like Extreme 100%, or like Ultimate Cat, and stuff like that. Like taking these two words, mashing them together to make a weird title that when you go online, people will see it and be like, that's dumb. Or you can get emojis, as we've mentioned, like kind of things that you can attach to your D-pad when you hold down the R button, and then you can press them, and they kind of, give you a little bit of communication with other people, but mainly it's for stuff like customization of your character, so tattoos on your face, or like different eye colors, different hairstyles, different types of racket or ball. And then when you complete a whole card, you get a bonus reward, which is a full outfit. So like the first one, you get this kind of like skirt combo for badminton for girls, and then for boys you get like this kind of like overall top, although you can mix and match. There's no like gender discrimination here. You can kind of do whatever you want with it, wear whatever you want, whatever type of body type. All of that stuff is kind of just like up to the player. There's no kind of distinct lines, which is nice. And I think that's a really fun carrot on the stick for it. The way that it is doled out, though, is based on, if you lose, for example, so if you're playing bowling and you lose, you'll get 30 points regardless. So if you just play a sport, you just get 30 points added, and you need 100 points to go up a level, basically, to unlock a new thing. And the way you unlock them is you press A on the card, and it will randomly kind of rotate through them, almost like a loot box, but a loot box where you know what you're going to get, and you're not going to get any duplicates. Like, it's not going to give you two of the same thing. It's going to just rotate through them. Eventually, you will fill out the entire scorecard, and you will get the reward at the end of it. But with longer games, it will take you longer to get through that. And so if you're only playing bowling, it'll probably take you much more time to unlock all of these little things, which is a kind of a meta thing, right? Like if you want to beat all of it within a certain time limit.
You're min-maxing a game that is not designed to be min-maxed.
Yeah, exactly. You don't really have to do that. But if you want to, Chambara is probably the best one to do it, because it's the fastest, and you can get losses quite quickly if you lose, and it'll rotate through.
Just rack up them losses to get all the...
Exactly. But if you do have really long matches or really long intense stints, like there was a match of badminton I had where like the rally just kept going, and so like there's bonuses you get for like long rallies. There's bonuses you get from winning from coming behind. So if you were behind and then you came back to win, you get a bonus for that. So you can max out like maybe 50, 60 points sometimes of like getting all these bonuses added on to the 30, and get a bonus for winning and all that sort of stuff as well. So it's a nice carrot on the stick, is what I'll say. It's basically I think there are two ways in which the game incentivizes you to keep playing it, because at a base level, right, it's very simple. You just play these games, and like usually for most people, I think with Switch Sports, they're going to buy it, and they're only going to play it a handful of times when family is around or when you have parties or whatever. But if you want to play it from a single player perspective, the carrots on the stick are the cosmetic stuff that you unlock, which is nice, and I think they've done a nice job with it. And they've already actually added a new card into the mix before the first card is gone. So the first card I checked yesterday, I was wondering this because you mentioned to me there'd been a new card added, and I was like, oh, does that mean the first one is already over? But the first one still has 5 or 6 days left on it, but they've already introduced a new one. So for people who are quick about it and already...
So there's 3 at the moment. You could probably go up to 4, maybe? We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes for the second one, because the second one has, I think, much longer time period. So my focus was do the first one with a shorter time period, then move on to the second one. And sometimes you'll be like, well, I want to do this other one because it has an item I want, and maybe I can get that item early. But again, it's all cosmetic stuff, so it's not going to affect any gameplay things in any relevant sense. It's just nice to be able to like take your character and add a little bit of flair to them. Like I just unlocked a new bowling ball yesterday, which is nice, which probably I'll never use because I won't play that much bowling. But the volleyball color changes, different racket styles, all those types of things I think is a nice thing. And the other thing, which we've been alluding to a bunch, is the ranking system. So once you have played a sport for a amount of time, I don't know what the actual amount of time is, but a requisite number of wins you get or a number of matches you have, the game will be like, well done, you've done well in the sport, you're now going to enter the pro leagues. And what that means is you're going to start ranking up from E all the way up to A, I believe. So you start at E level, and then if you beat someone, you get a bunch of points on your bar, like a level up thing, similar to how Splatoon handled it, I think, with its ranking system, where you'll kind of level up your bar, and then if you lose, you'll lose a little bit amount. So like losing is not as devastating as you might think it was. I think there's a thing with ranking systems that people get afraid of, is like, oh, I have a high rank, but what if I lose? And thankfully the punishment for losing isn't as harsh as the benefit for winning. Like you get a significant more amount of your bar filled for winning than you lose for taking a loss. You can probably do...
Are you going to be A rank badminton next time we record?
I mean, that's the goal, isn't it, right? That's what you want to shoot for.
What sport shall I go for?
I don't know. I think you like football a lot. I think the hard thing about volleyball and football is because you're relying on other people. It's less easy for you to do it by your own volition, right?
I'll do probably football, volleyball, and tennis.
Tennis, yeah. I think tennis probably makes sense. I think tennis is the easiest one to just jump into and play, you know? So yeah. It's a nice kind of like start. Every time I start up Switch Sports, I'm usually jumping into tennis for a quick game, like a warm-up session almost, you know? That's
why there's so many like noobs to blitz through at the start of tennis.
Exactly, yeah, because that's what most people are probably jumping into. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's like maybe 5 losses to 1 win is the equivalency there. So if you win once and then lose 5 times, you're going to be back to where you were, basically, which is a nice balance, I think, and it encourages you to keep playing even if you're on the verge of like, oh no, I'm going to go down a rank. It's fine, because if you go down a rank, then you'll probably easily get yourself back up there, because there'll be easier people that you're fighting against. But my first ranked game in Chambara was against a player who was C level, and this was like the second day of the game. I'm like, man, this guy has been no-lifing Chambara, hasn't he? And it's really stark, the difference going from just playing random people to playing this dude, because immediately this dude is like fucking ninja. He is like, patience is a virtue. He's just standing there slowly moving his sword left, right, left, right.
So intimidating.
And I'm like, okay, I'll just try and attack him. And like, I try and attack, blocked. Try and attack, blocked. Try and attack, blocked. Like, he is just fucking like absolutely has my number. And I'm like, okay, I need to learn what this dude is doing. And so after that, I just basically mimic what he was doing, which is like slowly moving the sword left and right to try and block people. And yeah, I think I'm at E+ on Chambara, so it goes E+, then D,
basically
D+.
Professional.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. But yeah, the ranking system has like 2 steps for each grade, basically. So yeah, you go through a plus. Maybe there's a minus stage as well. I'm not sure if it goes from E+ to D- to D.
There is in Splatoon for sure, and this game has a lot of Splatoon vibes. So
yeah. So I'm not sure how it goes, but I know it maxes out at A, I believe. I don't think there's an A+. I think A is probably the maximum. And I saw John Cartwright on Twitter posting that he had got to A rank in tennis, which impressive stuff for how early this game is.
You get like a new pair of trousers or anything?
I don't think you get any unlocks. I think you just get like a gold ranking on you or something like that, which is neat. But
you used to get, there's something golden you would get. You were able to like max out the sports in Wii Sports, and I remember like being golden in either golf or tennis. I think you get a special bowling ball in bowling on Wii Sports. So I'm talking about Wii Sports though, so I don't know if they kept this, but yeah, you got like golden something in.
That's true. I do wonder if there, because I didn't see anything after. He basically just got A rank. I didn't see anything after that to indicate you've now unlocked a golden tennis racket or something like that. That would be cool if they did do that. That's what Overwatch does. Like if you rank up enough points in the competitive league, you can use them to buy golden versions of everyone's weapons, that type of thing. So yeah, I think I am at the moment. I have hit ranked in tennis, badminton, and Chambara. So I need to do the others to kind of get myself on the ladder. I think the one drawback of it is it takes a little bit longer to find opponents, because at the moment there are less people who have gotten to the point where they're in a ranked mode. And I'm sure that once you get to like B rank, A rank, it will take even longer because they want to try and match you with an opponent who's the same skill level. And there's naturally going to be less of those people around. So
they do have a mode. Well, there's a function where you can select multiple sports at once to look for a match, which is really nice. So I can select everything apart from bowling and be like, right, here we go. I'm gonna play some Switch Sports, and
it will just match you into whatever one is quickest, basically.
Exactly. And I appreciate that doesn't fix what you're suggesting, where you want to play ranked at a higher level in a certain sport, but. You know, you might have, say you're really high ranked in badminton, but you also have tennis selected. You might play a lower ranked tennis match before a badminton match. Yeah. As fans or something. So like, it's a nice option.
For sure. Yeah, it's really good. So yeah, I really like Switch Sports. I think it's a great fun, and it may be quote unquote thin when you look at it from that perspective, but I think these games have always been kind of just pick up and play, just jump in, have a couple matches, and enjoy it, and not necessarily get that tied into like big single player stuff or anything like to that extent. It's always been a very casual series that I think is great. Now that you have it on your Switch, you can go around to people's places, you can play it with other folks and, family and stuff like that. I'm probably going to play a bit this weekend with my sister and see how that goes. And it'll be a fun kind of nostalgia trip, because I think a lot of people are talking about, like, why haven't they brought it back, this series, the sports kind of series?
We had been saying that for quite a few years, thinking that the functionality's always been there on Switch, but they just hadn't gone for it yet.
Yeah, and technically they did, like, during the Wii U, but no one cared about the Wii U.
And the Wii U, yeah. We were there. We made a video.
Yeah, and that was just an HD version of... It was basically a remake, right? It was just an HD remaster.
But even back then, it felt great to be able to play these sports online. Like, the online functionality, I mean, it sounds mad in 2022, but, like... It's really cool to like play these sports online.
Also, we should make a point, like, it works, and it's good in Switch Sports, actually. Like, we didn't have any problems at all. Like, it feels seamless. It works, especially in games like Chumbara, where, like, you need to have pinpoint precision.
It's essentially a fighting game.
Yeah, exactly.
You need that precision.
Yeah. Totally, and it was pretty much that. It was 1-to-1. It felt natural. It didn't feel like I was losing out on anything for being online, which is kind of a miracle, honestly, in a lot of senses. So yeah, that's great, and I do think it will be something I continuously check in on. And obviously, when golf comes later in the year, I'm sure we'll both hop in for that, play some golf and have a good time there. So. That's Nintendo Switch Sports. Really, really good fun, and looking forward to playing more of it as we go on. Become rank A in badminton. That's my goal. You've set it for me now, Bally. So
I'm going for tennis. I'm going to do it for next time.
Let's do it. All right. Next game we're going to talk about real quick. So I was talking about it, like, should I talk about this on the show? Because I don't even know if I have much to say about it. Because I now have this kind of genre of games, which is my train game, which is when I'm going to work a couple of days a week. I have my handheld Ambinic, and I'm playing like platformers on them.
Let's see how many JRPGs and platformers MBZ can beat in a year.
Exactly.
Play.
Just playing on the train. So obviously we had Matt on the show a couple of shows ago when he was filling in for Bally, and he was talking about Kirby's Dream Land 2, having also played Kirby's Dream Land 1, which I had played. And I was like, well, I've also got Dream Land 2 on here, so I might as well go through that and play it and see what that's like. So I did. I played through Kirby's Dream Land 2, and it's cool. I think it pretty much has a lot of similarities to the first game. The difference here is that you can now suck up enemies and take their power-ups. However, I didn't actually realize this until like 3 worlds into the game, because right at the beginning, I sucked someone up, and I sucked up a bunch of enemies and tried to take their powers, and I was like, oh, I'm not getting anything from these. I guess this game also didn't have that ability. But I guess the enemies that I was sucking up were ones that didn't give you powers at the beginning. So I kind of did that at the beginning, thought, oh, well, I guess it doesn't have this thing again, and then just didn't test it out on any other enemies for the rest of the game until like halfway through in World 3, where I did do it, and all of a sudden I got a power-up. I was like, oh shit, I have been missing this the whole game. So I was playing it a little bit handicapped, I guess, from that point in time. But also, there's an added layer here. So basically, the difference with Dreamland 2 is they add in the animal companion. So there are 3 animals. There's the owl, who kind of flows through the air, which is a bit weird, because like Kirby can kind of do that himself, so it's not like it actually changes much for you. So he floats through the air and holds Kirby in his talons. So the way it works with the abilities is each ability changes depending on what animal you have. So say you have regular Kirby with the lightning ability. On the ground, you can press the B button and Kirby will just like send out shockwaves from him. When the owl is holding him and you have the lightning ability, he puts a bolt of lightning downwards. So it's like you're kind of going across the screen and you can just like shoot a bolt of lightning down from underneath Kirby to electrocute enemies. And then it's different depending on what other animal companions you have. So there's the owl, there's the hamster, and there's the fish. And I think, so with the hamster, Kirby kind of rides on his back and you kind of run around with him. And the fish, Kirby's just inside the fish's mouth, I'm pretty sure, and just like poking out the front of his mouth. And each of those animals, depending on the power-up, will have a variance to it. So it actually adds quite a lot of complexity to a system that I think was only introduced in this game. So they introduced the idea of Kirby using the power-ups, and then on top of that, they also have Kirby with animals with multiple variants of those power-ups. So it actually is, it's a lot of kind of the stuff that I was missing for that first half of the game was like, oh wow, I really have missed a lot here by not paying attention to the fact that I can absorb enemy power-ups. And honestly, I do still think that you can kind of waltz through this game without paying attention to too much of that stuff, right? Like, that's the problem with Kirby level design, is just the ability to kind of float in the clouds above every enemy and not really have to engage with them.
Yeah.
It just kind of means
you get that in Forgotten Land as well, don't you?
You
it's
do.
A bit strange. It's like, okay, I get it, right?
But like we mentioned multiple times, I think, is that game has reasons for you to turn into certain abilities and enemies, you know, like it forces you, in order to find power-ups, you have to be a certain thing. And there isn't really that much of that in these older Kirby games. And yeah, to some extent, they build the worlds around it initially, of like the first few worlds. So the first world, they introduce the hamster, then they introduce the owl, then they introduce the fish, and then the subsequent worlds, you kind of have them whichever one you get at whichever time. So there will be situations where it's like, I'm the owl, but this level is underwater, so it doesn't kind of work that well. I should be the fish here, but I got the owl instead, and because I didn't lose it through the level, it means I'm just kind of in this weird situation. Also, when you go underwater, it's really annoying, because instead of being able to use your ability, well, actually, no, you can use your ability underwater, but if you get hit, you can't suck anything in underwater. So usually when Kirby gets hit, he loses his ability. You can just suck it back in again and reset it. Whereas if you're underwater, you lose your ability. Kirby can't suck anything in underwater, and so you just lose the ability. So if you get hit once underwater, you just totally lose your power up, and that kind of sucks, because then the only thing Kirby can do underwater is spit out these little water bubble things that are very piddly and very kind of don't have that much range to them, and so you have to get up close to enemies to do anything. So yeah, there's a little bit of fiddliness there and a little bit of still working things out, but it was enjoyable enough. And again, Bally, you were telling me all these train games, you're going to choose them for the jukebox segments, because I'm just listening to podcasts and I don't have any of the music turned up on the train.
Easy wins.
So I'm not going to know the soundtrack of any of these games, but I'm like, it's a Kirby game. I probably know what that's going to sound like as a Game Boy Kirby game. I've had that experience. So I enjoyed it. I think it's a good distraction, a good fun thing to play. And these kind of classic platformers are all super short. They're always like only a few hours long, which back then obviously was bad for kids, because they're like, oh, I finished the game already, Mum, get me a new one. And they're like, no, you have this for the next 6 months of your life, so you better get used to beating Kirby 20 times. It's nice in the modern era to play through them, because I'm like, yeah, it's another game that I just gone through and experienced and done a nice little platforming journey. So now I'm playing Rayman Advance on the train. Seems bad, honestly. It's not that great, but it's something to do with my hands while I sit on the train. So I'm gonna play Rayman Advance if it kills me. So we'll see how that goes. Bally, you have been playing a game while you deal with your little Bally Junior, picking them up, putting them down in the evenings. A game that is quite suitable to that.
Yeah, I've been finishing up Mario Golf, or sort of just finishing my time with it, because as much as I'm done with Mario Golf, I think Mario Golf was more done with me.
Okay.
Because yeah, this game is damn hard. I beat all the tournaments, barring the tournament that you unlock after credits. So there's like 5 tournaments, and I won those 5 tournaments. I was actually really chuffed I managed to win those. That was really hard. Very impressed with myself. And then credits roll, and then it unlocks the Mario Open, and you're like, Mario Open? And I'm thinking it's going to be Mushroom Kingdom themed, and to some degree it is, but basically every hole is designed like a Mario character. So for example, one of the hardest holes early on, and this course is insanely hard, like really massive differential in height, which makes it difficult. And for example, there's like a Lakitu shaped hole, and the green is just like one small part of Lakitu's shell. So the green is absolutely tiny. So it's really, really bloody hard to get the ball on the green, and as a result, you can't get on the green. You get in the rough, you over chip, you go in the rough again, and you can't roll the ball onto the green to putt and hole out the hole. So it's a really tough course.
Do you have memories of these courses, or is this making you realize you didn't get this far as a kid?
I think I got to the 5th course and never beat it, so I never saw credits and never got the Mario Open, but I did do the cheat as a kid to unlock all the characters. And I know that because I spent an awful lot of time, more time than playing the tournaments, playing the match play to unlock the characters.
Right.
And I managed to unlock all the characters bar 4, I think. So the 4 characters I still need to unlock with Mario. I couldn't beat Mario, and they're sequential, so I never saw the final 3, but the final 3 characters I think are Bowser, DK, and Metal Mario. So I got stuck on Mario. I managed to beat everyone else at match play, and the fun thing about match play is you can pick any course to play them on. So you think, all right, I'll play this guy Harry. So you got like random characters who aren't Mario characters.
This guy Harry. Here we are in the fucking Mario universe, and there's a dude called Harry just hanging out.
My go-to was Sunny. Sunny's got like a cowboy hat, so we like Sunny.
Okay.
So I played as Sunny, and then eventually I did unlock Harry, and then I played as Harry, and then it's like, right, I'm going to be Harry when they take on Mario, and I just could not beat Mario. So you can pick any course to play these characters at match play to unlock them, but it's just really hard. So you pick the easiest course, and then they start eagling out like really simple holes, and you think, great, well, I'm just getting birdies, they're beating me. So I think, right, I'll go for the harder course, but then they just nail the harder course as well. And it's just a really, really challenging game to anyone who's managed to beat all the characters at match play to like unlock them. Like, my hats off to you, because this game is very challenging. So
you're very good at golf games, like extremely good at golf games. So the fact that this put a barrier up against you is it's scaring me from playing this game.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard in a good way. I don't think the game's unfair. But yeah, I had to call it a day against Mario. So the Mario Open beat me, as well as Mario himself beat me at his own damn game. So there you go. But I had
why they named it after him, you know.
Pardon?
That's why they put his name on the box.
Why they put his name is the main man. And it's a fun decision that you unlock Mario in his own game. I like that. It's controversial.
Yeah, it is weird, isn't it? Because like every other Mario Golf game, he's just the default character from the beginning.
Yeah.
So now remind me, is this a game where you could have done a Game Boy thing where you took a character from your Game Boy game onto N64?
Yes.
And do you think that would have made a difference of like having a powered up character that you can take into these tournaments?
Yeah, I think having a character that you've trained up and played with yourself that has all their boosted stats, because I remember doing this much more with tennis rather than golf, but I did the story mode with tennis on Game Boy Color, had my crazy powerful character, put him onto the N64, and then just went through all the tournaments as my crazy powerful character. I never actually did that with Mario Golf. I did transfer the characters, but I don't think I got very far in the Mario Golf story mode on Game Boy Color. It's another reason I want to go back and play that game now that I'm a lot more mature as a gamer.
It would be great if that came to the Switch Online service with Game Boy stuff, you know?
I would love that. Yeah, I know Mario Tennis on Game Boy Color came to the
3DS
virtual console. Yeah. I know it did. I'm not sure Golf did. I don't know why they do one and not the other. Anyway.
Yeah, that might be something you want to pick up before the store goes away, I guess.
I have faith I shouldn't have faith, but I have faith it'll come to like the Game Boy Color, Game Boy games when they come.
See, this is the thing. Nintendo are going to close down that store before we have any confirmation of whether they're going to put Game Boy games onto Switch. So we're in this horrible place now.
Yeah,
should I buy it? Should I not buy it? It sucks.
Yeah. But yeah, you can get those characters from your story mode on Game Boy Color over to the main mode on this game, and that probably would help with those match play matches, because having a bit of extra drive distance makes a big difference. And if you can nail the timing on those, it's important. I generally go for the powerful characters, but not the most powerful characters, because I like a little bit more control, just a little bit, because I can't always hit those fairways, and boy is it important to hit the fairways in this game, more so than any other Mario Golf game I've played. But yeah, my nostalgia itch is well and truly scratched. I think this is a fantastic game, and it was so great because I got the nostalgia of coming back to this game, but I'm coming back to it with a lot more knowledge and skill and maturity about video games than I did when I was like, I don't know, 11 years old playing this game, getting my ass kicked. And I can quintessentially say I'm certain that I did use the cheat to unlock everyone back in the day, because there was just no way in hell that I beat Mario at match play way back then. Unless there's an alternate way to unlock them where you might be able to do it through experience points and just playing lots. But
which I certainly had the time back then to do that.
Exactly.
So,
great game. Very happy, and
awesome.
I'll move back to F-Zero X and future N64 or future maybe Game Boy Color games.
You really did choose two N64 games that just want to punch you in the face, right? With F-Zero X and Mario Golf.
Oh yeah.
So.
We need that Pokemon Stadium. That's what we need.
Yeah, exactly.
We're gonna do the gym leader stream.
Hell yeah!
First.
Hell yeah, for sure. Awesome. So the last thing we're going to talk about is I finished Chrono Cross, the Radical Dreamers edition. Obviously, was playing along with MinMax's Deepest Dive. Great way to play that game. Really, really enjoyable. Just kind of getting the most out of it and hearing about the different ways people went through, different characters people used, and all the different weird things that you can miss. There's just so much in that game. It feels this really interesting thing I learned actually is that you have this kind of cavalcade of characters, these 45 characters, and at any point in time, you can have any of those characters in your party, and so they have to account for what if you're in a situation where a dialogue exchange is happening, and your party members are kind of commenting on it, right? Because no matter who you have in your party, they're going to comment on it in some way. And it's this really interesting thing. Each party member has their own kind of like special dialogue script written for them, where the original script is always the same. So the thing that every character will say is always the same. But what they do is each character has their own flavor. So like there's this mermaid character called Menace, and she has like umlauts on some of her letters, like almost speaks in like a German accent. And so they have basically scripted it so that no matter what is said in the actual written text, it will kind of filter it through that kind of German script and like put it out the other side with umlauts on top of words and like phrasing slightly differently depending on what is said. Same with a character called Starkey. Starkey is hilarious because he's basically Olimar or a Pikmin before that game existed, where he's this mixture of Olimar and a Pikmin. It's like, what if a Pikmin was in Olimar's suit, right? With like the little astronaut head and everything. And he's this little alien guy who's a character you can recruit and uses spaceship later in the game, and he's actually a necessary character, which is super weird. But he speaks with double vowels, so every time there's a vowel in a word, there's a double of it. There's a dog character you get at the start of the game called Poshul, who's this weird purple dog, and every time that she speaks, she has a lisp to everything, so they add H's and TH's to a bunch of words. So it's this really like fun and weird way of getting around this idea that no matter who you have in your party, there will be some kind of variance to what they say, because they put it through this kind of program that kind of scripts out what the character is saying, but in a slightly different way. And I think that's just a really cool way to add that level of personality and uniqueness of like, well, I don't know if anyone in the world playing this game has had these two characters in their party in this exact cutscene at this point in time in the story. And it makes it feel natural, which is, it's a smart thing to do. What it does mean is that like all these characters, they're very thin in terms of their actual personalization and characterization, because you have so many of them, you can't really like flesh them out in a big way, which makes sense, but is also kind of like, it's one of those experimental things that this game was doing, and I think is really admirable, because Chrono Cross, like, it makes big swings, like really big swings, both narratively and mechanically, and like it is really unlike any other JRPG I've played. It's so bold in what it tries to do, and also like the ways in which it feels not constrained to what Chrono Trigger did before it, like Chrono Trigger was very bold and it did different things, and Chrono Cross, it's that rare sequel that doesn't kind of like follow on and doesn't feel like something the same. It feels so innovative and different, and just try almost in a way, because it was so shackled by the success of its predecessor, like it almost feels like that rebellious teenager just striking out on its own to have its own identity. And it's interesting, that kind of like idea of it almost at the end of the day comes back to Chrono Trigger, and like the ways in which it ties back into that original game are so convoluted and weird, and there's a massive lore dump like right at the end. There's this whole like back half of the game, because like for the most part the connections are light and there's different things you can infer and things like that, and then you get to the back half of the game and it's like the last 5 or 6 hours is just this absolute just lore like injection into your brain of like, oh well, actually this was this, and this is happening, and there's this entire kind of like conspiracy thing going on, and there's technology working away with time travel and dimensions, and like none of it makes any sense. And I watched like 3 YouTube videos that were trying to explain what actually happened at the end of Chrono Cross, but it is just fucking nonsense. There's so much nonsense that tries to make it almost tie back in to Chrono Trigger, to make it have this distinct connection, whereas I think it could have really stood on its own. And like I like that those links are in there, but I would have maybe preferred if they were a bit more superfluous and just like a little bit more hinting.
It's interesting considering how much you like Chrono Trigger.
I think they just do a bad job, right? Like I think they do a bad job of trying to link it into this narrative where they should have just left it alone almost, like they should have made it more of a reference point than trying to directly tie it in, because a lot of people over the years have talked about how Chrono Cross isn't really a sequel to Chrono Trigger and it's so different, and that is correct for like 80% of the game, and it's only the last like 15-20% of the game where it decides it's going to be this direct follow-up, and it decides it's going to take these characters from Chrono Trigger and like try and make a way for them to fit in, and like this person's a clone of this person, and actually there's this whole dimension shifting thing where they took this city from the future and it was transported to the past, and then in order to counterbalance that, this other thing happened, and there's like weird things with dinosaurs and dragons, and like I don't know, it's a fucking mess of like just nonsense being spewed at you. And literally right before the last boss, you go to this beach area and you're chatting with these like 3 characters, and they literally just lore dump even more stuff onto you, like big reveals. It almost feels like they didn't have time maybe to like flesh this out and plan this out, and they just kind of shoved it all in at the end. And it's madness, but I do kind of like that they do it in some sense, in a weird twisted sense. Like I like that they kind of go there and don't stick the landing, because it's almost bold in an admirable way. And that's cool. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think all the good things I mentioned last time about it are still there. Battle system still fantastic, really fun. Just like mixing and matching your party combinations, having the flexibility of like, knowing that you're always the right level. It's such a nice thing in an RPG to not have to grind, to not have to go out the world and find stuff and try and level up to get to this place that you're stuck on. It's always like signal to you that you beat this boss, you're the correct level, you should be able to finish them. You just need to make sure that you have the right elements, you have your strategy down, and you'll be able to do it. The second half of the game is definitely a lot more esoteric in terms of, okay, well, where do I go next? Because it does the JRPG thing, which we have experience from Final Fantasy VI. I think for me, Final Fantasy VI is a stronger game in its first half, where it's more linear and more narrative focused, and you know what you're supposed to do and where you're supposed to go. Whereas the second half of Final Fantasy VI feels like you have this whole world to explore, and you can kind of go anywhere, but it feels like there's less narrative through line, and there's less connections going on, and stuff that doesn't kind of match up in a exciting or interesting way in the same way the first half did. And it feels like Chrono Cross does the same thing, where it's like, okay, now you have the whole world.
Now it's an open world game.
You can kind of go anywhere, but like there is a specific thing you have to do to progress the story, and it's hard for you to figure out what that is that you have to do, which to some extent back in the day, like for a lot of younger players, is probably interesting, because it means that, as we were talking about, like, if you're a kid, you got Kirby's Dream Land 2, well, tough luck, you're gonna have to play that one platformer for 6 months. But with Chrono Cross, man, there are so many possibilities. Like, you can go to all these places, speak to all these NPCs with different NPCs in your party to see if there's reactions. Like I mentioned, you can take party members to their alternate universe versions of themselves and have conversations with each other, and sometimes that will unlock stuff like their level 7 techs and things like this. Like, there's a lot of like secret, like extra stuff that you can go find and do. But someone playing this in the modern era, I was just going to IGN and being like, okay, let's go to the guide. Where do I go next? What do I need to get? How do I get the strongest weapon in the game easily? All those sort of things that you would have stumbled across as a 10-year-old playing this game for 100 hours. But I want to be done in under 30 over here. So yeah, it's definitely like a game that you should lean on a strategy guide for in the kind of latter half of it, just because you kind of won't know what to do or where to go and things like that. But that's part of the era it was created in, and I don't really hold it against the game, especially when resources are so available these days, and it's also easy with the game's speed up functionality to get through the game at a relatively quick pace. So yeah, I overall, I really, really loved it. I think it is up there with me with Final Fantasy VII as a great PS1 era JRPG, and really, really unique. And that's the thing that stands out. It's just how different it is from any other RPG I've played, but still feeling familiar and having those certain tropes and having those kind of warm, familiar things that you want out of this type of experience. And yeah, I really highly recommend people, if you're someone who played Chrono Trigger and have always been curious about Chrono Cross but never really crossed the Rubicon, I would say now's the time to get in that boat and get across and play this game, because it's now very accessible and easy to check out and has loads of quality of life features that make it even more approachable. So Chrono Cross, the Radical Dreamers edition. I'll probably try and check out Radical Dreamers itself, which is also included in this collection, so maybe I'll talk about that next time. Much shorter game. I think it's only 3 or 4 hours long, so should be able to get that through that pretty easily. So anyway, that's going to close us out for the first section. We will come back after the break to take some of your emails and answer them. See you in a bit.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the second part of today's show. It is time for your emails. As MBZ said at the start of the show, we are running very low.
It's not a joke anymore. They're literally, we need emails.
The river has dried up, and we'd love some more emails. So please send your emails to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. Or you can join our Discord server. We've got a channel there just dedicated to emails where you can ask us a question and we'd happily answer it on the show.
Mm-hmm.
Our first email is from Matraya from the UK, and this was actually on Discord. It says, "Hi, I'm Ed and Bally. The recent discussion on how packed the game release schedule is nowadays had me thinking, if you had unlimited time but only to replay games that you have already played, what games would you pick? There's something really comforting about jumping into a game you're familiar with and not having to learn any new mechanics. It's just so rare that we have the time to do so. Feel free to list as many or as few as you'd like. Maybe some from different eras would be interesting. To get the ball rolling, I'd love to have the time to go back to all the Fire Emblems that I enjoy and try them on harder difficulties, or try out more experimental unit builds in the games that allow it. And even though it just came out last year, I often find myself having an urge to play Metroid Dread again. P.S. Hope Bally Jr. is doing well. Matraya." Thanks, Matraya.
Awesome.
He's doing very well. Thank you very much.
Awesome. This is a great question, because I think it's a rarity that we go back and replay games, because there's always new stuff and I'm always going to be more interested in new stuff. It's just the way that my brain works. I want to take in new experiences. I'm the same across generally most media as well. Like, I don't reread books. I don't go and rewatch TV shows or movies all that often. Like, I guess movies is probably the one where I will rewatch stuff more frequently, because I don't care about movies as much, and so the ones that I do like, I'm just like, I'm going to watch Pirates of the Caribbean again because I love that movie, or School of Rock, or like The Count of Monte Cristo. Like, there are certain movies that I grew up with that I, if they're on over Christmas or whatever, or stuff like that, or like I'm with family, like, oh, what should we watch? Oh, let's watch Love Actually again. I've seen it like 20 times, but it's that warm, comforting familiarity that I think a lot of people have with a lot of media, but for me, it really only works in movies. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just because I care about them the least, I guess. What about you, Bally? I guess with other forms of media, do you ever kind of go back and revisit stuff?
I mean, I can't deny I've seen episode 1 multiple times just as that comfort food. It's just so comfortable. It's so great. Star Wars has always been like that, where it's that combination of nostalgia and something you can return to that feels like a warm blanket,
Yeah.
You're right. I don't really have that the same way with games. Having said that, just playing like Mario Golf that I talked about in the first segment, that's the kind of like a warm blanket game, that a game I enjoyed in my childhood but didn't really master in my childhood. To go back and play that and get all those nostalgic feels at the same time as having a more of a mastery on the mechanics is a very satisfying feeling. And that's kind of, in a sad way, what dictates what I go back to, is when Nintendo decide to pick up something from the virtual console well, and they're like, right, let's put some N64 games on Switch. And sadly, that's my go-to for when to replay games, is often dictated by executives in Japan, and that's a bit depressing when you think about it.
Well, it's also a convenience thing on that point, because you don't have an easy way of setting your N64 up on your 4K TV and playing it. It's not convenient. It doesn't make sense, and you don't use emulation in the same way that I do. So you wouldn't have access to play that game again unless Nintendo were to go ahead and re-release it for you. And make it a bit of an event, I think that's kind of thing.
And the same with like Advance Wars Reboot Camp. Sure, I played Advance Wars 1 way back in the day, and then I played 1 and 2 on the Wii U Virtual Console, and I'm going to dip again on Reboot Camp because I just love those games. But again, it's kind of dictated by Nintendo saying, hey, we're going to re-release these games, and that's okay. I think there's so many nostalgic experiences like that I don't mind it if it is, as you say, it is all about convenience. In terms of games I'd want to go back to and replay more, the nature of the podcast means I think it's very hard to play ongoing games much with the podcast. And a game that I absolutely love that you waxed lyrical about for years and I just never played until it came to Switch, like 2-3 years ago now, is Overwatch. And I know people are talking about like the Overwatch 2 beta at the moment, and there's some issues with that.
There's a lot of mixed opinions out there,
Yeah, and it sounds like it's a game that's very divided between like the casual audience and the hardcore audience, and one seems to have like completely skewed one out of the existence of the other, which is a shame. But that's a game that I'm kind of just waiting for Overwatch 2 probably to come to Series X now that Activision's owned by Microsoft, whatever. I'll probably play it on there. But just a game that I can just chip away at for like, play half an hour almost every day and just really, soak it in and enjoy it. And the nature of the podcast is very hard to do that on top of the beat-to-beat game that I'm playing to talk about on the show. So when a more casual game does come along, maybe like a Nintendo Switch Sports, it's really nice that I kind of have that 2 weeks, a month, 6 weeks where I can play it in a very chilled, casual way and still talk about it as something relevant on the show. Like, it's a very nice combination because often we are playing games to talk about on the show, and you play a lot more games than me, MBZ, but I don't know if you feel it, but you still feel a little bit of pressure of, okay, what am I going to talk about next? What beat am I going to go for? Rather than, I'll just play 6 more hours of Halo Online because that's fun and chill.
Right, like it's about segmenting your time to be like, okay, well, I don't want to waste this time that I have on just playing 6 more hours of Apex Legends, because what interesting do I have to say about Apex Legends in 2022,
Exactly.
It's enjoyable. I think that's the way a lot of people play games, is like, I'm just going to play Final Fantasy 14 and that's all I'm going to play, and that's just comforting and fun and enjoyable. And I'm like, man, at some points I wish I could do that. Like, I do have that kind of, it's really interesting because I hear this from the opposite. It's always greener on the other side of the field, right? That's the thing. I hear people who only play one game, they're like, oh, I buy all these games but I only play Halo and that's the only thing I play. I wish I played other games. And then here's me on the other side being like, man, wouldn't it be nice to just play one video game? Like, wouldn't that be a cool thing to do?
But I mean, if we, for whatever reason, stopped the podcast and I had more time for Overwatch and Halo, the much, much, much bigger part of me would be like, I really miss, I think Metroid Dread's a great example, a bit when the big Nintendo releases come out and we play them and the community and people in Discord, on our Discord, talk about the game, and it almost feels like a community, like communal event that we've all played this game, and now me and MZ are going to talk about it on this podcast. Like that, I think that's what I yearn for the most with my video game playing, is like the big Nintendo releases that we can talk about on the show, because that is much more satisfying than the part of me that's like, it'd be nice if I could play some more Overwatch, like one that weighs the other massively.
Yeah, I do think it's like an attitude thing, and I do wonder that, if I wasn't doing this, would I have just committed to Final Fantasy 14, and would it be my favorite game of all time, and would I only be like watching streamers who'd play that game and like looking at fan art and stuff like that, and just be really embedded in a community? Because I know I can do that, right? I did that with Pokemon for many years, and like my personality type is like, I can get obsessed with something very easily and just seek out all and every piece of morsel of information about it. So yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about. However, Bally, if the world was changed and we had unlimited time, and we could only replay games we'd already played, what are the ones that you would go to? What are the ones that you would keep coming back to and be like, I want to go back and play that again?
I mean, probably some pretty boring answers. So a lot of our top 20 from, our top 50 games of all time.
Right. I would love to replay Earthbound,
Yeah, Earthbound, Breath of the Wild. I mean, yeah, Tropical Freeze, Celeste, but again, a lot of these games are a lot less impactful when you replay them, and
it depends, right? Like, I think if something is more mechanically driven, like I guess Celeste is very mechanically and story driven, so like the story stuff may not have as big of a splash, but that's a game that I played well beyond its story just for the mechanical part of it, right? And same with Tropical Freeze. Tropical Freeze is just like, it just feels good to jump through these levels, like there's a primitive nature to it.
I think Mario Odyssey as well, to just do something that's mechanically driven that you can just jump back in, because I know Caroline went back to Breath of the Wild and she was like, it's just not the same, it's just not, not that, because that sense of discovery that you only get the first time, and as mechanics driven as that game is, arguably the sense of discovery is still the number one thing about that game, and why that game is so special to us on the show and so special to so many people who rate that game so highly. It's that sense of discovery. And also there's just the part of me that's like, if I play Breath of the Wild again now, I'm going to be a little bit Breath of the Wilded out by the time Breath of the Wild 2 rolls around, March next year.
Well, I mean, in this world, Bally, we only are allowed to replay games, so that means we could never play Breath of the Wild 2. So.
That's true. That is true.
So,
we can't play new games. We replay old games. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. For me, it's always going to be like big, long RPGs that I can't justify playing again. Like
that's why you got your Amber Nick. You're going to play them on the train. It's all sorted.
Well, if that thing could play Persona 5, that would be great, but it can't.
We're not that far away from that, You got your Steam Deck on its way. You can sort all these things out.
So here's the thing, you could technically play Persona 5 on a Steam Deck because Persona 5 released on... I know it's wild to think about, but Persona 5 came out on PS3. Because of Japan mainly, but like that game was promised to be on PS3, so there is a PS3 version of Persona 5 that exists, and there is PS3 emulation that also exists, and so I think it was Jeff Grubb who tweeted out Persona 5 on the Steam Deck, but yeah, you technically could emulate the PS3 version of Persona 5 on the Steam Deck, so that is a possibility, but I mean, look, that's like a 90-hour commitment, that game, and I loved it. It's phenomenal. It's one of the best RPGs ever made. So good. Same with its predecessor, which is my favorite of the series, Persona 4, which took me 60-ish hours, Like, that is a long time, but, like, the feelings I get when I think about the Persona series and those experiences, they're so special. And, like, I would love to be able to just jump back in and, like Maitreya was saying, like, trying different builds with different characters and stuff. For Persona, it's about making sure that you have all the social links and you can make different choices about, like, what clubs do you join? I think when I did Persona 4, I joined, like, the music club and the football club, but I could have joined the drama club and the basketball club. So those are two, like, total incomplete storylines with characters tied to them that I didn't see my first time through. So, like, missable stuff that you can make different choices around is a really important part, I think, of replaying games for a lot of people. Triangle Strategy is a great example of a game that I had a great time with and has so much stuff for replayability in terms of using different characters and making different choices with all the different paths in that game. It's something I did a lot when I was younger with Fire Emblem, right? Sacred Stones has two different branching narratives. You have Erika's path and Ephraim's path, and I would replay that game multiple times to do both paths, but then I'd replay again to use different characters. The other wrinkle with Sacred Stones is that each character has a different class that they can change into. So do I make Franz a Great Knight or a Paladin? And each time I would have a different choice about what to change him into. Like, default, I would always make Joshua a swordsmaster because that makes sense, but what happens if I make Joshua an assassin? Like, is that interesting and different? Like, how does that change your approach to combat and, like, who you bring with you and all those types of things? Like, what characters that you usually leave on the bench do you then bring with you into battle? And, like, Triangle Strategy and Fire Emblem both trade in that type of replayability where it's a lot more about, okay, you've seen the story once, but now let's try it with this different angle combat wise. And then, but Triangle Strategy has that layer on top of it of being a game that has so many different maps that you can play depending on the choices that you make, and then a specific, like, golden route that you can then take. So, like, completing Triangle Strategy probably takes 4 full playthroughs, and my first one took 40 hours, so that's a lot of time to be investing into a game. And if I had infinite time, honestly, right now I would probably be playing Pokemon Legends Arceus to finish out the Pokedex, right? Just to go and do that stuff because I wanted to do that, but, like, I'm just moving on to different things. Same with Triangle Strategy. If this was old MBZ who didn't own a PC and didn't own a PlayStation, didn't own every fucking system, of VR headset and all these other things.
Playdates on the way, remember? Don't forget those.
I know, yeah. We just, like, exist in this melange of video games. If this was me in, say, 2010, let's say, right before I got a PS3, and I was playing video games, I probably would have played 2 games this year. They would have been Pokemon Legends Arceus and Triangle Strategy, and I would probably have 500 hours in both of them, right? That's what my life would have been. And that's a nice thing, to think about. Like, that I could totally see myself having done that. But it's just a very different path, right? It's just a very different kind of approach. And, I probably would have gone shiny hunting and done all that stuff and become more embedded in those communities and just really focused on that as the thing that I enjoyed, and I still would have really enjoyed myself. But it's just a different approach, So yeah, those are good examples. I think Eastwood is another great example of just a really special experience that, even though I played it so recently, I think it would be great to play again. And there are things I missed in that game as well, right? I missed a couple of power-ups for Sam. There are definitely things that I could go back and do some of the side quests that I maybe skipped over and those types of things. So use different weapons, like I know you use the flamethrower a lot and I didn't. So if I took the approach finishing the mini RPG, like going back and actually doing that, there's so much in games that I feel like we leave to the sidelines because we're like, I just kind of want to play through the thing to finish it and get to credits, and it's always so hard to go back after the credits roll.
I mean, I have just, for those who don't know, I have just sunk 71 hours into Horizon Forbidden West. And did a bunch of side stuff, but I still only managed to do 60% of everything in that game. So yeah,
games are big.
Games are big, and they're getting bigger, but I still feel like I have, even with a baby, I still feel like I have the time and energy when I want it and need it to. Yeah. It's just to do with spacing out games. Like, it is possible, but yeah, going back to games is another level versus, playing new long games. I find it like it's much harder.
Yeah.
But
what about stuff from like childhood? Is there anything you can think of when we were younger of like GameCube games or like N64 stuff that you would want to go back to?
I'm genuinely praying that like Pokemon Stadium comes to the Switch Online, because I think that would just be the most fun live stream we could do together, where we take on the Elite Four and all the gyms and just go through it, because I think it'd just be so satisfying.
Yeah, it's definitely a good one.
Not to mention the mini games. Come on, we're gonna play those mini games.
Oh my god, we play those mini games so much. They are really good. I don't know, what other games would I replay if I had infinite time? I think it is the big ones, right? So like Witcher 3, what a fucking incredible experience. Like, absolutely, like that summer I played Witcher 3, some of my most memorable times playing games, like absolutely sunk myself into that world, did nothing else. And, it's a big game. There's a lot of it. There's so much stuff still in there that I could go back and do, like hundreds of question marks on that map that have been unfilled. But like restarting that game, going in a different direction in terms of what gear I went for, because like in Witcher 3 there are different Witcher schools and you can get a different armor set depending on which one you want to go down, and usually with the materials it's really hard to get like all of them, because it means like going through and doing a lot of extra kind of tedious stuff to get it. So I went through the cat school of armor, and there are this entire side quest trying to get that specific school of armor. Like, what if I made a different decision there? What if I made different choices in the story? There are different endings that you get depending on the choices you make with Ciri, and those are like almost kind of invisible choices in some senses. Other ways in which subquests resolve. I could go and learn how to play Gwent. I basically ignored Gwent the whole way through when playing Witcher 3 because I was just interested in like finding out what happened in the story and like progressing that. But now that I know what happens, now that I know all of those beats, it'll be nice to refamiliarize myself with that narrative, but it's even nicer to just like take your time with it and be like, I'm replaying this, but I'm going to do everything this time. I'm going to play all the Gwent matches and do all those side quests that I totally missed as a result of just not having a good deck because I didn't play anyone at the game. That for me is usually what I'm going to go back to, is like big, long, meaty games that I just can't justify playing again at this current point in time.
Yeah. It's tricky. But very good question to try. It's always something that nags away at me, is like, that's a very good game. I need to play it again. But and finding the time can just be tricky. But
and Metroid Dread is a great example. I will probably play that again this year at some point. So.
Yeah. Our next question is from Jamie from Australia. Says, hi MBZ and Bally. If you had a limited budget through the year, would you prefer to pick up a couple of big long games, a bunch of smaller indie titles, or a combination of both? With the cost of living these days, it's hard to afford to buy new games all the time. Outside the birthdays and Christmas, I rarely get new games these days, hence I resort back to playing the games I already own. In this case, I'm currently playing Octopath Traveler after I already 100%ed the game previously. Fantastic game.
Nice tie into the previous question as well about replaying games. Yeah.
If I do purchase a game, I want to get out of it as much as possible, as it might be a while before I get my next one. So my preference is RPGs like Fire Emblem Three Houses. which I put in over 270 hours over nearly 2 years, and Octopath Traveler, which took 100 hours to 100% complete. So which do you prefer if you didn't have a lot of money to spend? Long games that you can sink your teeth into over a long period of time, or smaller multiple experiences that don't last as long? Keep up the great work. Regards, Jamie.
Well, yeah, I think Jamie is the example of like the person I was describing of me years ago of just playing Pokemon Arceus and Triangle Strategy is like, just get one big RPG and commit to it. Fire Emblem Three Houses, great example from the previous question of a game. Yes, I want to replay 2 more times so I can go and do the other 2 routes that I missed because I only did 2 of the 4 routes in that game, right? So, there's a lot of stuff like that. I would say this is a tricky one, right? Because I know that you like kind of both of these kind of routes, like the big games, the ones that
We're pretty good at doing both, I feel like, short games, long games, fitting other games in between.
But if you had to choose between them and you had a limited budget, for me, I am going to go the small indies 100% of the time. And I'll tell you for why. Indie games, to me, and the independent space has always been, and I think since its inception, the place where innovation and interesting new ideas come from. There are great games in the AAA space, and I enjoy a lot of them. Spider-Man's great, Insomniac Spider-Man, a lot of fun. Is Spider-Man innovative or breaking new ground or doing anything interesting aside from telling a cinematic story alongside very polished game mechanics? Not really. Like, I've seen it before. It's very fun and extremely polished and great to play. And that kind of defines a lot of big games for me, where they are polished to a sheen and super great and really, interesting and fun experiences, but there's never anything like that breaks through about them, unless you get an Elden Ring or a Breath of the Wild.
I was going to say, there's some pretty long, innovative games.
There are rare instances where the budget allows for you to do stuff that small developers can't. But when it comes to really interesting stuff, I think of stuff like Undertale. Like, think about the game mechanics of Undertale and the way that it handles narrative and the way that it does choices and all those sort of things. You're never going to see something like that from a big studio. And there are as many Undertales as there are, big. When you compare it, like that type of experience exists so much more frequently in the smaller space. And for me, I'm always going to gravitate more towards those types of games. I think partially it's also driven by I like finishing things. I like taking things off lists of like finishing games, and I can also finish a lot more smaller games than I can bigger games. So there's a little bit of that bias creeping in. But fundamentally, those smaller games are always going to be where the big ideas come from, where the new, like, think about genres that are big today. Roguelikes are one of the biggest genre. Look at a game like Returnal. That game doesn't exist if Binding of Isaac doesn't happen, right? That game doesn't exist if not for Spelunky. Those games carved a path to where now the big AAA games are looking at those games and thinking, what if we took those mechanics and did something with them? That's where the funnel happens. All the interesting ideas start at the bottom and funnel their way up to the top. And eventually, a few years later, you see the big games mimicking what indie games have been doing for years. But fundamentally, right now, and it's because of business realities, it's because of the space where, as a giant company, you have to make something that is safe and you are not going to take risks. You're going to make Ghost of Tsushima because it's a safe open world game with not much innovation in it. It's just going to work. People will like it. It's fun. They will buy it. But you're never going to see something like, I don't know. There are so many examples of like interesting, weird mechanics in smaller games that you just have to be developed in that space before they become, widely accepted in the wider space of video games. So generally that's what I would lean towards. And yeah, it means that I miss out on playing, Mario Odyssey 2, but that's fine. I'm biting my tongue, but I'm like, I know.
I think your argument is good for yourself when it comes to like a lot of the stuff Sony's working on, where I agree that it's less innovative. It's a lot more cinematic driven, whether it's Spider-Man, Last of Us, etc., God of War. Mm-hmm. But when you get those big, innovative first-party Nintendo games, Luigi's Mansion 3, Mario Odyssey, Metroid Dread, like, I think it becomes a much harder question, actually. And I agree that the innovative sides a lot more with the smaller indie titles, but smaller indie titles are also getting much bigger. I'd rank games like The Pathless and Kena Bridge of Spirits as indie titles, and they are smaller, but they've still got those big budgets and marketing budgets, and they are like systems-wise big games when it comes to like worlds to explore and things to do. So like I feel like the indie space is also taking a bit from the larger AAA space in its own right as well. So it's getting even more blurry. I would, if push came to shove, if I only played the big games or the small indie games, because of Nintendo first party, I think I might even side with the big ones, as uninnovative and boring as that might be. But I just think those experiences are, if you're only having a few a year, like, I gotta go with those. I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't want to kind of take the route because Jamie asked like, what, or a combination of both, because obviously a combination of both, right? Yeah.
Oh, that's what we both currently do.
That's what we do.
That's the
exactly.
dream. We're living the dream. Yeah. That's what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Which I think is just a bit of a cop out because otherwise, it makes it a very easy decision. But yeah, I totally get that. I do think innovation, I don't think necessarily happens with those Nintendo, like Metroid Dread's a Metroid game. Luigi's Mansion 3 is building off a game they already made. I think Nintendo's innovation comes in the first time they do something. So like Splatoon is a great example of like, holy shit, that's innovation in a big space, right?
And I think Odyssey and Breath of the Wild, which are two very good innovative examples in the last 6 years, I guess, but like they are almost like the absolute upper crust of Nintendo's development studios, and it's arguably only those two games and, Splatoon first time round where they are truly innovating in a first party AAA sense.
Yeah. And then you kind of are seeing it. I think the reason stuff like Elden Ring pops off so much is because it is so rare to see a huge game take such a big swing like that, So often the games that come out are Ghostwire Tokyo, where you're like, well, this is a thing. It's the same as every other thing. Cool. I guess people will buy it, but I have no interest in it.
But then you do. I know we'll argue this till the end of time, but Last of Us Part 2 mechanically is a very safe, very rote experience, but it's
except for those ropes. Those ropes are fucking innovative. That's what I'll say. Ropes. That's like the most innovative thing in that entire game.
But people thought the controversy of its story and what it was doing with its characters and characters you play in that game, and I won't spoil it, but like that's where they would argue their innovation is. And you're right, mechanically it's not actually doing anything differently. It's just basically a different cinematic decision to some degree, and it's a different storytelling decision that is controversial in its own right.
That game is really innovative from a structural narrative perspective. Yeah.
And that's what that game's appeal is for me personally, and many others. But as you say, I can't defend that mechanically. Apart from the ropes, it's an incredibly safe.
I will die on that hill that Naughty Dog should make a game that is just about ropes. Honestly,
yeah. And they tried to say, "Oh, we're doing all this interesting, unusual stealth stuff." But I think the point you've made before is like Metal Gear Solid 5 has done most of that stuff before. And,
and way better.
That's not where the innovation in that game lies.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, it's a really hard question because I think you're right. The Nintendo stuff is where it really buckles me, and I'm like, well, it means I'm not going to be able to play that or that or that or that, which are the things.
Dread.
I know, yeah, but I don't know. Do you count Metroid Dread as a big game? It's like it's just 2D side-scrolling Metroid game. I guess we have to go with like price-wise here because the question is about budget, right? If you have limited budget, it means that for every Metroid Dread I buy, I could buy 6 Celestes, which is, I think for me, on a price to value proposition, I think this is the other thing about this question is that currently for me, it doesn't actually make a lot of sense just because of the availability of video games right now, right? If I was growing up, or if right now we were living in the era of like the mid-90s with video games where prices were really high and there's not a lot of kind of free to play. There's no free to play. That the market just doesn't exist. The idea of having stuff like subscription services and Game Pass and Switch's online service, the idea of having Epic just giving games away on PC, sales that happen constantly, even on the eShop. The eShop is rife with like, go and buy Bastion and Transistor like from Supergiant for like £1.50, and that gets to the point where like limited budget for video games, I wouldn't say like breaks down as an argument because new games are always going to be expensive. But if you have the patience, you can buy a fucking lot of video games for not a lot of money.
Yeah.
So I do think that it's easier to enter the space these days with the advent of free-to-play stuff alongside just the ridiculous, deeply discounted sales that happen constantly on every storefront. it just makes it a lot, more easy for people to jump into stuff. So,
yeah, I will say, I think from a personal financial perspective, I'd have a much harder time justifying to Caroline all the money I spend on games if it wasn't for our Patreon. I'm hugely grateful.
Of course, yes.
Sure.
No, that helps a great deal. Lets us take risks on things, like I wouldn't have bought Mario Golf on Switch last year. I just wouldn't have done it if not.
I wish I hadn't.
Yeah, but like we had an interesting conversation about how that game sucks, I think that's valuable for people to hear. And
I gotta know where Mario Golf's at, whether I like it or not. I gotta know.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, appreciate patrons, of course, which maybe segues us into the end of the show, I guess, nicely. But Bali, before we go, do you want to remind folks where they can send their emails to?
Yes, please send your emails to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That's ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. The river is dry. We need those emails. We'd hugely appreciate it.
Yeah, send them in. Cool. Well, let's do some plugs and things and get on out of here. As we were mentioning, Patreon is a thing that you can go and use to support us if you would like. You can support us at different tiers and get different benefits as a result, like bonus episodes and things like that. Bali, we would like to thank some of our patrons.
Yes, thank you to our $10 tier patrons. They are Zach S., Atari Alex, Thomas, Matthew, and Albert. Thank you all for your $10 tier support. But we'd like to thank all of our patrons. It's hugely appreciated the money you support us with and support the show.
Absolutely, yeah. Head on over to patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife if you want to find out some more. You can also go and rate us on Spotify, as we mentioned at the top of the show. Appreciate people doing that. Easy thing to do, much easier than going writing iTunes reviews. But also, if you want to go write an iTunes review, I won't hold it against you. Still really appreciate those. They're still very helpful in the wider kind of dissemination of the podcast to the people out there. So please do go ahead and do that. You can find us all over the place. We're on Twitter. If you go to @TNL Podcast, you will find the podcast account where we tweet things out about when the show is happening and bonus episodes and all those other things. You can follow me on Twitter @LordNBZ. Bally, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter @Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91.
Lovely stuff. Obviously, you can find the show in various places. As we mentioned, we're on Spotify, but we're also on Stitcher. We're on any podcasting app that you have. Search for This Nintendo Life. You should be able to find us, download us, subscribe to us, all that good stuff. And we're in your little podcasting app every 2 weeks with another episode. And yeah, I think that is pretty much it. Pretty much wraps things up here. We are rapidly approaching what I'm going to call E3 season, Bally. It's not E3 actual, because that doesn't actually exist this year because the ESA is.
Do you think we'll find out before the next show what Nintendo will be doing, or will they be even later than that?
I think they tend to go a bit late these days in terms of turnaround of like announcement to what they're doing. Microsoft just announced their conference that they're doing with Bethesda. I think probably maybe after next episode is when we'll hear. But that's getting very close. That's like a couple of weeks away by that point, maybe 3 weeks away. I think 3 weeks away makes sense probably is when they're doing it. And yes. Also, from my work perspective, I have stuff that is going to be involved in the E3 time period, which is very exciting, and I'll probably talk about it on the show when it happens. But yes, some games that we're publishing is going to be fun. So looking forward to that. Yes, that will happen, and it will be busy but also exciting, and it's going to be a fun time. So. In any case, thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back in a couple of weeks' time with some more podcasting and more stuff talking about video games and all that other stuff. Until then, thanks for listening. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye, folks. The musical interlude used on today's show was Spocco Square from Nintendo Switch Sports, copyright Nintendo 2022.